Terrible time. Hello and welcome everyone. This is Sanger, a PhD candidate in linguistics. If you can hear me clearly, please type number one in the chat box. I just want to make sure that everything, especially the sound, is working. Wow, very good. Okay, thank you so much for your attention. So let us start. Um, Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whichever one it is for you. I am very glad that you are here to join me in an interesting interview with an American Kurdish linguist, Dr. Shuan Osman Karim. Dr. Shuan, if you can hear me, hello and welcome. Okay, let me. Okay, your co-host.
Good to be here.
Thank you so much for joining us. Yes, my dear participants, before diving into questions and the encyclopedic answers from Dr. Shuan, I just would like to say a few words about our special guest. So give me a minute till I share my screen. Okay. Mm-hmm. Okay, so sorry. Mm-hmm. Yes. Okay. As I mentioned in the very beginning of the session, that Dr. Shuan Osman Karim is an American Kurdish linguist with a deep personal and academic connection to the Kurdish language and identity. So let me tell you a bit about his academic background. Uh, Dr. Shuan earned his PhD and MA in linguistics from the Ohio State University. And even before that, he completed his bachelor's degree in linguistics and Japanese at the University of Texas at Austin. And his main field of expertise is historical linguistics, Kurdish and Iranian languages. He works especially on Gorani, Zazaki, and Central Kurdish, some other dialects, studying both their structure and history. But his interests go even beyond that. He He has also studied ancient and classical language like Sanskrit, Akkadian, Syriac, Japanese, and even Old Church Slavonic. So this wide knowledge gives him very strong comparative insights across different language families. There is one quote I love from Dr. Shuan, which is, if you get to know a language, it will tell you its problems. That shows how deeply he thinks about the meaning behind languages. So right now, the Dr. Shuan is a postdoctoral fellow at the University of Würzburg, if I not mispronounce it, Würzburg in Germany, supported by the Alexander von Humboldt Foundation. So before this, he worked at the University of Cambridge on a project called All Home, which focused on historical multilingualism in the Near East. He has also taught linguistics and world languages at a high school in Columbus, Ohio. This is one book, Gorani in its linguistic context that it is by him and another scholar, I think is Saloma Gulami, uh, that delves into trends and linguistics, documentation, preserving languages, and so on. Uh, you can find more about his work, his projects, especially on his official website, shuankarim.com. So now we are very excited to hear from him directly. Once again, Dr. Shuan, welcome and thank you for joining us. Let me stop sharing my, yes, okay. So let's begin the interview.
Thank you for
Um,
having me, Kaksangar. I should add, though, that quote, if you get to know a language, it will tell you its problems, is actually from a this linguistics story
mhm.
core. So is this project that the Linguistics Society of America had inspired by National Public Radio in the US, where they were interviewing linguists and getting their stories. And I got the pleasure to sit down and do some of those recordings. And so actually, unfortunately, I forgot who originally said this, but
Okay.
the the concept, right, that when you if you live in the languages and you study the languages and you read the literatures, you'll discover an entire world of questions and fun insights, and
Thank you so
that's
much for the correction, Dr. Schwan.
it's all good.
It's really interesting. So let us start with the question is, Dr. Schwan, I visited your website and found many important academic projects. But to be honest, one of them really caught my attention. Echoes of Vanishing Voices in the Mountain. So what is this project about? Or let's say, what is it trying to do?
Yeah, so this project is actually the brainchild of Jeffrey Kahn and Paul Norlander at the University of Cambridge. And so they're Neo-Aramaic specialists. Especially Jeffrey Kahn, his entire career has been documenting these varieties, Masihi languages that are spoken in Iraq and Iran. And what they discovered is that there are many elements within these languages that are very similar to Kurdish, right? And of course, that makes sense. We've been living in the same towns, cities, villages for thousands of years. Why wouldn't it happen that way? And so they put this project together, bringing in some of the some young Kurdish linguists, myself, Masoud Mohammedirad, Ergin Opingen, brought us all together, and we, just like the quote, we were living in the languages, reading Neo-Aramaic and noticing the patterns. And because we all had specialties in different areas of Kurdish, Haurami, Zazaki, we were able to find all of these wonderful patterns, right? And of course, through that, there was this opportunity. I know Jeffrey and Masood and Paul produced a folklore volume with different varieties of Kurdish. And we've been able to put together a lot of really interesting comparative studies because of it.
Well, that was really interesting. Dr. Shan, what about that historical grammar of Kurdish? What is this about? Historical grammar of Kurdish.
Yeah, so this is something that's probably going to be a lifetime or a career endeavor for me. So essentially, we have historical linguistics, right? And so that's the comparative method. And what the comparative method does is it looks at languages that we know to be related to each other,
Good.
right? And through comparing cognate words, right? So these are words that exist in each of the languages because they were in those languages back when they were one. And
Mm-hmm.
we all separated and went to different places, and languages changed over time. But through comparison of these, we can triangulate backward and figure out what these languages were like when they were one. And for most historical linguists, the goal has been to go as far back in time as possible, right? We want to know what humanity was like going back thousands and thousands of years. But for me, with a language like Kurdish, we don't know what was happening 500 years ago. We don't know what was happening 1,000 years ago. And there's so much variety within Kurdish that we can use these same principles to figure out our own history. And so that's the goal of this project.
Good. That was interesting. Appreciate your answer. Let me move to another question. Dr. Shuan, uh, your work bridges several disciplines, linguistics, philosophy of language, even cultural studies. So the question is that what motivated you to explore Kurdish linguistics through such a multidisciplinary lens?
Well, this is kind of my story, right? So I grew up in the US. I grew up in America.
Mhm.
And growing up there, I only spoke English. At home, we that's what we did. My father, he spoke Kurdish, Arabic, Turkmani, European languages. And so I always knew that this existed, that people had languages, but in America, there was a strong pressure to speak just English. And when I was in my early 20s, I moved to Howler, got a job teaching English, taught myself Kurdish. And I remember very distinctly being on the phone with my mother. And she asked me some question. I don't remember the question, but I remember my answer. What I meant to say was, I forgot. But it came out as, it left my thoughts.
Oh,
Yes, you see, so this was Libirimchu, right? But in
yeah,
English.
yeah,
And the moment I said that, I just was completely shocked. I didn't know what happened. Something had clicked in my brain that something was going on. And after that, I just became obsessed. I didn't know what linguistics was. I didn't know any of these things. But I started reading about Sapir-Whorf, about how language could affect the way that you think, and started digging deeper and finding more questions. And so from the very beginning, I was always interested in language in the brain, how language in society works. And of course, the history of Kurdish is the most important thing. So I think it's just inherently interdisciplinary.
very clear. Okay, so you are originally from Kirkuk, your father,
Yeah.
maybe.
Yeah, my father's from Kirkuk, but actually his father was from Konya.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Yeah, so we're kind of from all over Kurdistan. My grandmother's father was from Slemani, so I think, uh,
Yes.
yeah, you understand.
Clash of the cultures. The people, from Kirkuk considered to be polyglots because, speaking Kurdish, Turkmeni, Arabic, and so on. That's apart
Exactly.
from dialects. Okay. Shifting to another question, as a someone trained and active across the America, US, Europe, and even in the, let's say, Middle East, how do you reflect on your academic journey and identity as a scholar and as a linguist?
Well, that's an interesting question, right? Because there's actually quite a big gap between the way that America approaches linguistics, the way that Europe does, the way that Iraq does.
Hmm? Yes.
There's different ways of looking at these things. And so in the US, the in the US, the push is for theoretical linguistics, right? This started all the way back in the 60s when Noam Chomsky was kind of reinventing the field, and people from that theoretical background started going into newly founded linguistics departments. And so they developed the science of language in this way that's very focused on theory, but not necessarily on the languages. Whereas in Europe, the tradition, they already had a strong philological tradition, people studying languages and literatures. And so linguistics became kind of an add-on. And so I find that there's a very difficult interplay trying to live between these two worlds, to live in the languages, but also be focused on theory.
Indeed.
And so these are the decisions that a scholar needs to make. Are they going to be primarily theoretical? Are they going to be philological? Um, you see the same thing happening in my subfield in historical linguistics, where there are people who study old languages and call it historical linguistics, and then there's people who do reconstruction. So I find myself trying to stay on the theoretical side of things, to focus on the science of language.
Mhm. Yes, thank you so much. This was really very clear. So, Dr. Shuan, as a scholar active in the both Kurdish-speaking worlds and the West, of course, how do you see the global academic community's engagement with Kurdish language studies today compared to, let's say, a decade or 15 years ago?
Well, we have a problem, right? There's a lot of obstacles to Kurdish linguistics doing well in the West. And one of those big obstacles is retirement, right? So there was a few really big names, especially here in Europe, that were really supporting Kurdish, right? So Jeffrey Haig in Bomberg, for instance, has been supporting Kurdish through his typological work and supporting Kurdish linguists. Jeffrey Kahn in Cambridge he's an Aramaicist, but he's supporting Kurdish projects. There was Simin Karimi in Arizona supporting Kurdish projects. He's primarily a Persianist, but supporting Kurdish projects and Kurdish students. And so we had all of these really big names who were very strong linguists within their subfields and supporting Kurdish. And almost all of them have gone into retirement or mandatory retirement within the last 2 years.
Mhm.
So at this point, there's almost nobody who is primarily a linguist who's working on Kurdish and is a professor. This is a dangerous fate for Kurdish linguistics, I'm afraid. I mean, it's not all bad news, right? There's a lot of really great Kurdish linguists who are doing work today. Um,
Sorry for the interruption. You are talking about the Euro
Yeah, well, Europe and America,
in
right?
America.
So
Okay,
in
okay.
Europe and America,
Mhm.
the people who are supporting Kurdish linguistics, doing Kurdish linguistics at the professor level, are all retiring or have retired. Most of them have already retired within the last 2 years. And so now there are amazing Kurdish linguists, people like Masoud Mohammedirad in Cambridge, who is a documentarian, typologist, sociolinguist, goes to every village and speaks every Kurdish variety, right? We have
So,
people who are
Dr.
doing,
Schwan,
yes, uh, yeah,
I'm I'm a I'm an also I want to become a linguist.
great. If you want, we can talk about that after the interview. I'd be happy to discuss that with you. Yes, so we have people who are young scholars who are doing really great work, and I think that there's potential for the field to grow as long as these people can continue on and get the professor jobs. Unfortunately, there's not a lot of people who are funding Kurdish linguistics, so this is another problem that we have.
That's really sad, but it's also interesting that we hear that people like Masoud Mohammedirad, I think he's just published a book these recent days.
Mm.
So, Dr. Schramm, diglossia, dialect diversity, and the question of standard Kurdish. So, how do you personally approach this complex issue in both your research and in your public engagement?
Well, so first, I have to say very clearly that I'm not necessarily for standardization.
Mhm.
I think that one of the things that makes Kurdish the great language that it is that it hasn't standardized. And so essentially, there are two narratives about what language is, right? There's one narrative that came about after around the First World War, where European powers were developing nation states, and they came up with these ideas of one language, one nation, one religion, one ethnicity. But the world has never been like that. The world has never been like that. And in these places, especially in the West, have had the pleasure and misfortune of growing up in the West and seeing high levels of standardization. And what I find is people actually understand less. And I'll tell you what I mean. In places like Kurdistan, for instance, or we could go anywhere, in places like Mexico or Central America, anywhere in the world, places like China. Um, there are many languages spoken by many cultures, met with many different ways of living. And in the past, everybody just learned each other's languages, right? You could go to Rojhelat and a Shikak person, a Mukri speaker, and someone from Kermanshah could all talk to each other, speaking their own varieties and understand each other, even though those are three sub-dialects, right? We used to learn each other's way of talking and be able to communicate with each other. And in many places we still do. But when you standardize, we say, well, actually, there's one way to speak. And then everyone who doesn't speak that way becomes an oppressed group. And I think it's dangerous for us to repeat the errors of the West. We're lucky that we didn't go through this yet because the West is learning that when they lose this diversity of language, they also lose intellectual diversity, they lose cultural diversity, they lose everything. So, sorry, there's a second part of your question, which is how I deal with this in my research.
Yeah,
And
research and public engagement.
yeah, absolutely. So I largely stay away from political issues, right? But in my research, I treat all Kurdish equally. I don't focus only on one variety. I take data from all over Kurdistan and work with it equally. So, and I actually it was a good thing we all heard from Dr. Michael Chayetz on Monday, I believe it was,
Yeah.
because I spoke with him about the Kurdish alphabets issue when I was early in my PhD program. I contacted him and we spoke about this. And ever since, I've been only exclusively using Hawar in linguistic materials and making sure that all of my colleagues do the same thing. Um, I think that Kurdish is particularly rich in this sense that we have very strong alphabetic tradition and anyway, I support the this kind of pan-Kurdish way of writing things and stuff like that. But anyway,
Um, well, there's a statement that says that standardization kills activity, kills the language itself.
yeah, I think that that's definitely true.
Oh, I've got my own answer. So, okay, let's shift to another question. What challenge, Dr. Shuan, do you see in teaching Kurdish or Kurdish-related topics, the culture, for example, at the university level, especially in European situations?
Hmm.
Are there enough resources, tools, or even recognition?
I would say no. No is the strong answer, and it's the problem exists on multiple levels. The first level is that there just aren't enough students, right? In order to have people teaching this stuff, you need students who want to take the classes. And there are plenty of people who do, but scattered all over the place. And
Mhm.
so there's not really a concentration of this. And I think what it comes down to is that there's a soft power issue, right? The languages that people want to study in the West, I'm talking about non-Kurdish people, right? People, Westerners, the languages they want to study are the ones that they either see as being possibly beneficial to their careers or something that has given them some kind of passion, interest. When I was in undergrad, the Japanese classes were overflowing because students who watched Japanese animation and ate Japanese food and watched Japanese film and all these things wanted to go do those things. Now, after that, it was Korean became really big because students were excited about the media, the music, the movies, the film, and Kurdish just doesn't have this yet. And I think that that is a failing that is not an academic one. When people are interested in Kurdish, some of these problems will solve themselves. The other problem that we have is what I call the day job problem, right? So what I mean by this is the people who work on Kurdish have to do it under the guise of something else that pays the bills. So maybe you get a job as a Persian linguist, and then you get to do some Kurdish because you were hired on to do this. Or a great example, well, no, I shouldn't give any more examples. But the point is, you have to find some position that gets you hired, and then you can work on Kurdish. Uh, it's yeah, not the best situation.
Right, that was interesting. Dr. Shuan, from your perspective, what are the key linguistic or conceptual gaps, that need to be addressed for Kurdish to let's say thrive in modern academic and scientific context?
Mhm. Well, so the first hurdle that I think that we need to solve is the documentation problem.
Yes.
Kurdish is spoken over a very large area, and yet we only know a lot about a couple of the way they speak in a few towns, right? Thanks to the Echoes of Vanishing Voices project, we have some data from all over Kurdistan, but
All of
it's just all over, yeah, from north to
yes,
south.
yes.
Um, and and the interesting thing is, it's just a questionnaire, right? We went around, did recordings, asked some questions, and got some grammatical forms, and we know it gives us just enough knowledge to know how much we're missing.
Mhm.
Kurdish is very rich. It's one of the the richest linguistic areas there is,
In
and
terms of what? In terms of what? When you say
uh,
that Kurdish is rich?
yes, in terms of grammatical diversity, in
Yes.
terms of folklore, in terms of uh,
Maybe vocabulary?
contacts between different groups.
Yes.
I mean, we're very lucky. We don't have to go outside of Kurdistan to find all of the diversity that you see in the world's languages. And and there's just so much that needs to be done, but we don't know that much about most Kurdish varieties. It's sad in a sense, but it's also empowering because there's a lot of research that needs to be done. And these are things that people can do from any village. It doesn't matter if you're from a city or from a village or from the west or from the east. You can come and be part of Kurdish. Um, and so then there's some other concept kind of hurdles that we're dealing with, right? The one of the ones that has kind of given me the most grief so far is that there's a legacy of scholars that are sometimes referred to as Orientalists
Mhm.
in the Kurdish tradition, right? So some of the first people to come in and do work on Kurdish came from Europe, and they wrote things that they just made things up. Right? So they do maybe some good documentary work, do a little description, and then when somebody would say something that didn't fit their preconception of what grammar should be like, they would correct it and put a footnote. They say, well, the speaker actually said this, but clearly they were not a good speaker or something like that. Uh, there was another one I ran into the other day. I was working on a paper with a colleague, and we got a review back that said that the thing we were talking about was clearly just Persian influence. They love to say anything about Kurdish is Persian influence, right? And so they gave this long kind of explanation about contact between Haurami and Persian, and gave some citation from back to Tedesco saying that there were Hauramis in Hamadan or something like that. And we went back to the sources. They're citing some Arabic chronicle that says that in between Hamadan and Sharazur in the mountains, there are Gorani people. That's true. That's where they are, right? They picked two landmarks, put you right in the middle and said, okay, that's where they are. And then later, this European scholar came in and said, oh, Hamadan, they said Hamadan, there's Goranis in Hamadan. If you go north of Hamadan, there are villages with names like Goran, Goranagan, things like that. And they said, okay, there must have been Goranis or Haramis there this whole time. And then in the footnote, they say, well, actually, the names of the villages are Julagan, but clearly the people were just mispronouncing. So these scholars, they had an idea and then they just made stuff up to support it. Um, and so we have to get over this. We have to essentially turn off everything that was written, go back to the languages, and look at what facts are actually there. We can't rely on the accuracy of things that came before.
Well, that is interesting, all these backgrounds, and that's what's called the encyclopedic answer. Let me move to another question, Dr. Shuan. What role does digital communication, for example, the social media, the Kurdish Wikipedia, this activity, for example, uh, play in shaping the Kurdish language today?
Well, I mean, the truth is, I don't know exactly, right? Social media is the way that we stay in communication in the diaspora and back at home, and language develops in this area. And there's some young Kurdish linguists now who are working with social media and trying to understand how the language of Kurdish social media has evolved into different conventions and things like that. But I think as far as shaping things go, it's really back to the soft power thing that I mentioned earlier, right? Kurdish is particularly rich in things that could make us very popular in the Western world and give the Kurdish language and Kurdish culture a broader appeal, right? And this is essentially the Kurdistan that I grew up with, right? Um, Stories like Duaz de Swari Mariwan, stories of great fighters and great egos and great characters that would be very popular in the West. We have the dances, we have the music, we have the languages. We need to find a way to bring this stuff into the Western world.
Um,
Yeah.
Talking about young linguists,
Mhm.
yeah, that one is attracted me. So how can Kurdish linguists collaborate across, let's say, dialects, disciplines, and even borders? So are there initiatives you think are promising, or let's say ones you would like see more of?
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, obviously, I'd like to see more collaborations and things like that. We already have now for I think three years or 4 years the International Conference on Kurdish Linguistics. This is I think it was started by Songjil Kundodu and Ergin Opingen, but now there's a lot of people involved with it. This year it's going to be in Bamberg next month, actually, right? And so we already have Kurdish linguists coming in from Kurdistan and the diaspora doing work, collaborating, presenting on Kurdish. Um, there's not a day that goes by that I don't get an email from young Kurdish linguists who want to get involved with projects uh, and join Western academia. This is happening. We have the interest. We have some conferences. I'm putting together a research group right now. Funding comes through to work on the typological and historical questions in Kurdish. But we need more collaborations with Kurdish universities, right? I know the folks at Cambridge were trying to get a collaboration together a couple years back, and things didn't quite work out. But we need Kurdish universities and universities in the West to join together on building linguistics units and think tanks and research centers. It's the only way this is really going to have longevity.
Well, back to your project. Well, as I mentioned, it's from the very beginning of the interview. That's one caught my attention, like there's a vanishing voice in the mountains. So that project explores historical multilingualism. So
Mhm.
what insights does this project give us to linguistic interaction and migration in the Near East?
Yeah. Well, it tells a story of cooperation. That's what it is, right? So when Jeffrey and Paul started this project, they had ideas about Kurdish interacting with Neo-Aramaic, and they had some proof of that, right? Aramaic is very famous for having these Kurdish-like elements in it. And when all of the data was coming together, we started to notice that it's not just standard Kurdish getting pushed into Aramaic, but convergence on both sides. That shows that Kurds were living together in harmony with Aramaic speakers, right? Not in conflict. And we were learning each other's languages and communicating. And beyond that, we've seen that there was particularly Haurami and Aramaic have converged in wonderful ways, and it's we're starting to see support from that from historical accounts as well of communities of Christian and Jewish Aramaic speaking communities living in harmony with Haurami and even composing poetry in their languages and it's a wonderful story of cooperation and coexistence and that's really interesting. And then my particular thing, which I think some people disagree with me on, but I think there may be we may find consistently more evidence of this, but that's that the Zazaki is particularly important. That there may have been interactions between Zazaki and Armenian and Greek and Aramaic, and so the convergence there seems very strong, and I think it's going to shape the way that we think about Kurds in the past.
Uh, Dr. Shuan, I can see that some participants says that since it's about Kurdish language, why you don't speak in Kurdish? So
Oh,
let me move from the Kurdish studies to broader linguistics, let's say philosophical and academic reflection. So
mhm.
what is your view of the role of English language as the dominant language in global academia? Does it, let's say, enhance knowledge sharing, or does it create barriers to linguistic diversity?
Yeah. I have serious mixed feelings about the role of English in academia. I mean, it's easy for me. I grew up speaking English, right? So I have that going for me. But English doesn't deserve to be the language.
And the reason?
Well, colonialism, right? English is the language because it's spoken everywhere. It's spoken everywhere because of
Yes.
colonialism, and so I feel like we're supporting that. But at the same time, I struggle every time I pull a copy of Monem Gedank off the shelf, and I have to read German to learn about Gorani and the
Right.
early 1900s, and I struggle when I read Fata in French. And just yesterday, I had to read a book in Russian on Kurmanji of Khorasan, right? And so uh, having to go through and read in all of these different European languages to get to Kurdish is seems like an unnecessary struggle. And of course, if we're working on Kurdish and Kurdish is what we care about, why not read about it in Kurdish? That's interesting to me too. But actually making commentary on a language in the same language maybe isn't the best way to do it anyway, right? And we've already all of the structural matter, the rules of glossing, the way that we compare things is in English. And so I think we're stuck with this whether we like it or not. That's it.
Yeah, it's interesting. So, Dr. Shuan, what excites you the most right now in the field of linguistics or cultural studies, especially in linguistics? I would say linguistics better. Are there emerging trends or new research area, or let's say areas you find especially promising?
Well, I'm really excited about the future of language documentation. I think
Mhm.
that is going to be a big game changer, right? Um, uh, Recently, Masood Mohammadirad and I have been working on a new protocol for documenting languages, right? And so the idea is we've been kind of automating a lot of the steps in between things so that we can go out and collect more data, meet with more people, collect more stories, and get more insight into languages. And so the way that the speed of language documentation, the way that we can amass data is getting better. Um, I think the AI and machine learning also plays into this. And with more data, we can do more typology, right? We can look at all of the languages in the world. They used to make universal claims about what language is like based on just a few languages, mostly European, mostly Western European, right? But now we have data from all over the world, from
Yes.
language families, from isolates, and we're able to say so much more. And one of the reasons for that is that there's a trend toward open access.
Mhm.
So if you get a major European grant, they want you to publish all of your material open access, right? So anyone in the world can download these things. Anyone in the world can access the recordings. Anyone in the world. It used to be a scholar would collect a bunch of recordings. They'd use some of them for a small project. They'd go into a box in somebody's basement, and then nobody ever sees it again. And so I think we're working that that's not going to happen as much anymore. Yeah.
Uh, well, I have more, let's say, a couple or three questions, but indeed, to be honest with you, I found something on your project, which was converting the Word document, I think, into latex, something like that.
Mm.
What, it was a tool, I think.
Oh, okay. Yes.
So before diving
Oh,
into
yes, I have.
AI and artificial intelligence, you do know that artificial intelligence is rapidly influencing many fields, including
Yeah.
linguistics. So, from your perspective, what can AI, especially, offer to linguistics, particularly in terms of data analysis, corpus building, or language preservation? Since you are working on documentation, you have priorly talked about this.
Yeah, I think to talk about AI a little bit more generally, and my opinion on this has been shifting a lot lately. It seems to me that right now AI empowers people. And what I mean by that is that any kind of skills gap you have can be filled by AI now. So to give you an example, I was talking just now about language documentation,
Yeah.
right? So in language documentation, there is a bottleneck that occurs. And so what happens is you do a recording, let's say you collect a story or a folk tale or something. For every minute of recording, it takes 8 hours of work from a linguist to listen to that recording, type it out, segment it into meaningful units, come back and do morphological analysis, and then prepare it for archival. So this is a massive amount of work for to put in to do documentation, right? And so um, Masood and I have been working on this protocol for language documentation where we use machine learning models to we train machine learning models to transcribe speech for these understudied languages like Kurdish, and then we feed those into like software that automatically parses based on work that you've done, right? It learns from the linguistic work that you've done, does parsing there. You talked about the LaTeX thing, so I was writing Python code to convert gloss text into publishable formats and build dictionaries and things like that. So we're trying to automate all of these processes. And so I wanted to create an application that does all of this for you, right? So that linguists could collaborate from all over the world. And Masood's work with Haurami could allow someone else who's working on the language to have these kinds of tools available to them. And with AI, in 2 days, with minimal coding ability, I was able to design an entire app. We're going to launch it next month. Uh, there's never going to be a skills gap again for people. If they want to do something, their imagination is the limit. To the extent that they can conceptualize what they want the final thing to look like, then they can do it. But I don't know, maybe we're in a sweet spot right now where AI hasn't taken over doing everything for people. And if you use it now, you can really do something wonderful. So.
Yes, well, that was really, important, interesting. So do you see potential for AI in historical linguistics or the study of endangered and undocumented language? And
Mhm.
I think I have seen something on your website. You are also working on uh, documentation of Shabaki, if I'm not
Mm.
wrong. If I'm not wrong. So what
That's
are
not
its
wrong.
limits? Yeah, what are its limits and opportunities? Both of them.
Yeah. Well, I think obviously, again, bridging the skills gap in doing things, AI is going to help a lot with that. But I think for historical linguistics in particular, there's an opportunity to solve some of the big problems that currently exist. And I'll give you an example without going too deep into this because some of this is just the arguments of the linguists, right? So when you're doing historical linguistics, you compare a lot of forms in a lot of languages, and through comparison, you reconstruct what the language was like when they were one. In order to do this, you have to be a historical linguist. You have to have seen many examples of countless languages doing things to understand what is more common, what is less common, to understand directionality of change, what is likely to happen, what is unlikely to happen, so that you can make a principled analysis.
Mhm.
And rightly so, computational linguists have come in and said, that's not scientific. If you have to be a person with specialized knowledge to do this, to make these decisions, then that's not empirically testable in any sort of way. So they wanted to bring in computers to then make these decisions for us. And what they've done is they've gotten rid of 200 years of careful, meticulous building of techniques and tendencies and things like that. And I think artificial intelligence may help us develop mechanisms for making those decisions that are nuanced and replicable. So I think that's one of the big things within historical linguistics.
Yes. Well, very clear. It's nearly an hour, Dr. Shuan. So before
Mhm.
uh, I let or give opportunity to the participants to ask their questions, maybe attention, insights, or any uh, addition. Let me ask you my last question. It is
Sure.
important, especially for me. So, talking about AI, artificial intelligence, looking ahead, how do you envision the future of linguistics as a discipline? Will it become more interdisciplinary, more data driven, or something, let's say, entirely new?
Yeah. Well, it's going to become more data driven. It has to, right? We've
Good.
been making claims about things based on very little data for too long. And of course, there are many great scholars who've been doing massive typological work, and I'm not saying everybody's like that, right? But as we know more of the empirical domain, as we know more about more languages, we'll be able to make more accurate claims about the way that language works, and we'll be able to do much broader studies into theoretical topics. As
Yes.
far as being interdisciplinary, linguistics already is the most interdisciplinary field there is, right? Any other field, if you add language to the mix, it becomes linguistics, right? If you're doing psychology, but it has to do with human language, it's psycholinguistics.
Yes,
If you're
indeed.
doing sociology and
The
linguistics,
same.
it's sociolinguistics. Yeah, if you're doing philosophy and you're talking about language, it's semantics, right? There's every single aspect of linguistics is just the intersection of one field and language. So, yeah.
Okay, Dr. Schwan, that was really interesting. Thank you so much for joining us. It was an honor indeed. Okay, and thank you so much for these all participants. So now I will give them opportunity if they have any notice, questions, maybe attention. So you can raise your hand at the bottom of the Zoom. And also, if you want, you can ask your question. And in the chat box, we already have some of them, starting with someone. Wow, that's a nice question. Someone called Saman Hajar. Dr. Shan, what advice would you give to young researchers or students who want to study linguistics or Kurdish language? Oh, that's a good question.
Oh, Shuan.
Um,
Um,
yeah,
yes.
just
So my advice is figure out figure out what you're passionate about, figure out the thing that interests you most, and focus on that, right? So Kurdish is important, and there's so much work. It doesn't matter what sub-discipline of linguistics, what sub-area, there's work to be done on Kurdish. It is understudied. There's what I would call low-hanging fruit. There's so much to work on. So if you find some aspect of that that really calls to you, follow it anywhere that it goes, and Kurdish will come with you. And then contact somebody, right? I don't know what stage in your academic career you're at, but um, for me, the moment I got interested in something, I emailed a professor or a researcher or somebody and scheduled a Zoom call. Or before even Zoom, I was making Skype calls with people all over, right? If I read a paper by you and I'm interested, I'll try to set up a call so we can talk about it, discuss it, see how if there's any potential. It doesn't matter what stage in your career is at. If you're interested, reach out to people. We love to talk about what we're doing. Yeah. Anyway.
Good. The same person has another question asking that. Do you think the academic world is paying enough attention to Kurdish linguistics? What more can be done? Wow.
Yeah, I mean, I think maybe I covered some of this in the talk, but
Yeah,
no, it's not. We need more support for Kurdish language, and the fact is, we don't have it yet. It's possible, right? But we need um, Kurds to invest in the future of Kurdish studies, and I'll tell you what I mean, right? In the US, there are tons of positions. There's postdoctoral positions, professorship positions to work on the Persian language, right? And there are Persian language societies that have foundations with grants that are producing positions all the time that are targeting work on the Persian language. We don't
yeah,
have that for Kurdish. And it's not that our language is much richer. It has more work that needs to be done on it, right? And so,
right.
yeah.
That's correct. Yes. And another person, dear participants, you can raise your hand. If you have something in the bottom of the Zoom, you can raise your hand or ask your question in the chat box. So someone called Adam Rashid. In your opinion, what are the best publications, researches about Kurdish morphosyntax written in English? That's, I think, too specific. Yeah.
Perhaps,
Hmm.
perhaps
Yes.
the best.
Um,
I'll think about, you should email me on that one. I'll give you a list. Okay.
yes. Okay, dear Adam Rashid, I think, okay, I think we have got a question from Heman Koi. Yes, Heman Koi. You can speak
Right.
now.
Well, that's me. Hello,
Hello.
Shuan. Good to see you again.
Good to see you.
Well, I have a little controversial question, actually.
Hmm.
Now, when we can translate anything we like to any language
Hmm.
in the AI era, why do you think we need to do linguistic?
Well, I guess the question is, what do you think the purpose of linguistics is?
And
So
this is exactly what I'm asking you.
yes, translation, and Kak Sangar is studying translation right now, so this is a very important question for him. Uh,
Sure.
is one thing that linguists do, but linguistics is not just languages and literatures, it's the intersectional science of language, right? And so the purpose of studying the intersection of physics and language, studying acoustics, the way that sound travels from your mouth to your ear, and then the way that your ear processes these things, uh, is getting at a different aspect of science, and it's science for science's sake. And there may be some application later down the road, but that's
Could you
not
say
the purpose of
could you
linguistics.
say one or two of those? What is the application in the society? How do we benefit from it?
Well, let's pull back and talk about my specialization, right? I'm a
Sure.
historical linguist, so I'm
So,
trying
sorry,
to.
I hope I'm not taking too much of your time.
No, this is fine.
It is okay.
As a historical linguist, right, I'm trying to triangulate back in the history and figure out what Kurdish was like when all of the varieties were just one. And
Sure.
what happened, migrations, who did we come into contact with? I'm answering a question, who are we? Right? Which is a question that is so important to Kurdish people. This is a very important question. And people keep telling us who we are. They keep saying we're the children of jinns or the kids that were saved by Koa Asengar, or saying that we all of these stories, Kurds or Sumerians, whatever, right? So people keep telling us who we are. Oh, Emarule Media, Khosrawin, right? We have these stories about who we are, and everyone has a different story, and they could be true, they could not be true, we don't know. But the language doesn't lie. We can't fake the history of our people that is baked into every word and every dialect and every corner. Maybe it tells us that we're not who we thought we are and it cuts the golden thread. Maybe it confirms. What it is going to tell us is that we have a rich, independent history of growth and contacts, and it is a wonderful story, and it's our story. And the only way we're going to figure it out is through historical linguistics. And that's why I'm here.
Absolutely. Yeah. But do you think it is going to survive AI, all this historical background?
Is it going to survive?
AI?
I hope so. Certainly
Okay.
not if we standardize and tell everyone they have to stop speaking the way their grandma speaks. Then it won't happen.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much, Shuan. I'm not
Real
taking any
pleasure.
more time.
Thank
Thank
you
you.
so much, Mr. Hammond. Thank you. Okay, back to the chat box. Someone called Nicholas Landivar says, I tried to use AI to build a code to analyze a small corpus, but was never sure if I could trust the output. It basically
Mhm.
had to count and return a figure. I guess you need to know more about coding to see if AI is doing its work
Yeah,
well.
that's a very good point. You can't trust the content output from AI. You can't. You have to check it. So what I use AI for is to have it generate the code that can do something, but then I have to use my own knowledge of coding, right? I would not be able to do it if I didn't already know Python, if I didn't already know the kind of the philosophy of coding. But I learned that because of AI, right? I learned that because I had a skills gap. I figured out what I needed to know, and then I figured out a course plan, and you have to fill every moment, every crack in your day when you're not doing something else with building your toolkit. And AI can help you figure out what skills you are missing and how you can get them. And that's what you have to do. You have to learn to code. Sometimes you have to learn another language. That's just how it is, if you want to do the work that you want to do.
That's right. Okay. The chat box is Zakaria Horshank. Mr. Zakaria says, nice discussion and great explanation. Thank you. Thank you too, Mr. Zakaria. So there's someone raised the hand. Omar Ahmed. Yes, you can speak. Yes,
You're
Mr.
muted.
Omar, you can speak. I've asked you to unmute yourself. Please, if you can hear us, you can speak. Okay, there might be an issue, no problem. So, yeah, the same person asked in the chat box, to what extent is he aware of the research done in the field of linguistics in Kurdistan?
That is a great question. So I have had the pleasure of reading some very interesting articles that were published from Duhok University particularly about Kurdish phonology. I think that there is no doubt that there are things coming out of Kurdistan that I am missing, especially if they're not being published in these major academic journals, and there's hurdles to this. And so I think, and I'm glad you brought it up, because this is what we need to do, is we need to bridge this gap, right? We need to make sure that people in Kurdistan are publishing in places where the West can see them, and that people in Kurdistan have access to what the West is producing as well. And the interesting about this is what I've noticed is that there are good linguists at these universities in Kurdistan who are producing really interesting material. But then what ends up happening is they end up adding English to it, for instance, or adding some other, kind of comparative point so it's not focusing on Kurdish. And I think that that is a strategic decision to make their work more accessible or to make it more marketable, saying that you have this other thing. But actually, uh, the great work is right there in Kurdish. And so I think we need to maybe find a way to make these analyses more accessible and more Kurdocentric.
Uh, Good. Dr. Shuan, someone called Shafan says, could you tell us, Dr. Shuan, the name of a book in linguistics that covers all branches and sub-branches in detail that can persuade us as the students in the field? Well, he asks about some encyclopedia, I think.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm not sure I understood the question.
He asks about a book that covers all branches and
Of Kurdish,
sub-branches of the linguistics.
of linguistics.
Is there any book?
Yeah, I mean, any intro textbook has that. There's
Yeah,
tons of them. The language files at Ohio State University,
indeed.
they publish one. Yeah.
Okay, Dr. Fatima, I think, thanks for sharing the idea of working on language documentation. It is one of my research interests. I would like to see many projects in this regard. Okay, that's good. I don't know if I have any other questions. Good. Okay, Dr. Shuan is more than 1 hour. Thank you so much for,
May I ask another question, please? I had my hands up.
Mr. Hammond, yes, you can, please.
All right, well, thank you very much again. Shuan, you grew up in in American society.
Mhm.
Your native language is not Kurdish.
Yeah.
But you are both a Kurd and a foreigner. And where do you think your contribution in this field of linguistics as a foreigner, if you distinguish yourself from Kurdish linguists, how do you think your contribution differs from the Kurdish scholars, and how could you make a greater contribution, because you are an outsider, even if you are linked to Kurdish?
Okay. That's an interesting question. Well, for starters, I've always approached this that I have to be a linguist and a language scientist first. And even though Kurdish is my passion, is my love, and I want to dedicate all of my time to working on Kurdish, my biggest contribution is as a linguist in general and as a historical linguist in particular. And because of that, that's how I can distinguish myself in that sense. As far as the interplay that you're talking about, I think that obviously there's drawbacks to me being a foreigner, as you say. Just in the fact that I didn't grow up with the language, it's not native to me. I'm looking at it with fresh eyes. I learned Kurdish in my early 20s, right?
Sorry, but I see that as an advantage, actually. Please
Yes.
go ahead.
Well, in a sense, it is an advantage because I can look at things from this, with a magnifying glass kind of view. Nothing is just how it is. Everything is, oh, that's interesting. I should try to dissect it and figure out what's happening there. So that is, but also there's a cultural thing about being born in the diaspora. And that's that I have no illusions about Western cultural superiority. I lived there. I know what it's like. I know that Kurdistan is every bit as great and every bit as as forward and modern as the Western world. And in fact, the Western world isn't in many, many, many ways. And so I've never once thought that there's cultural superiority in the West. And so I think that's a real advantage that I have,
Thank you very much again.
of course.
Um, Thank you so much, Dr. Shuan. Two more questions before I end the session. The
Yeah.
first one from Professor Dr. Himdat asking, as a high-profile researcher, have you thought of publishing your articles in Kurdistan journals? This will help the journal's visibility worldwide.
Mhm. That's a really good question.
Indeed, yes.
The truth is that I haven't thought about it because, like most researchers, I'm what we call running from the Red Queen. So in the story of Alice in Wonderland, Alice is being chased by the Queen, and she has to run as fast as she can just to stand still. And that's what academia is like. We have to publish in the best journals with the highest profile and do it many, many times and write many, many books and collaborate with as many people as possible and bring in money from grants. And then you get to roll the dice and see if you become a professor one day. And and so it's hard. And so I never thought about, I'm always thinking about, I want the number one journal. Number two is not okay, right? And so I haven't thought about it, but you're right. It's a travesty that I have not thought about that. And perhaps there's a way that I can be publishing in both places and make some of this stuff visible. And we should definitely talk about that.
Well, in addition to this question, Dr. Imdad asks, have you thought of building a team of young researchers from Kurdistan universities to work with you in projects in future? And he says that you are ready to facilitate building this connection and network as a Megamind plus Academy.
Yeah, that's my dream. That's my dream.
Wow, that's good. Okay.
I'm working on putting together such a team, but when the funding comes in, I will put out a call and try to bring in everyone.
Good.
Yeah.
The last question from Nicholas. Could you share anything unexpected or surprising that you found out in your historical linguistic research trying to build such a big puzzle with missing pieces? Even if it is an anecdote, perhaps there's no more time.
Perhaps I'm sorry. I'm not sure I heard correctly
I
the question.
myself have some, yeah. Nicholas Landiver says, could you share anything unexpected or surprising that you found out in your historical linguistic research
I mean,
trying to build
surely I
such?
can.
Oh,
Surely I can.
good.
There are many, many, many such things. Uh, One of them was about, I'm not sure that this is actually the right thing. Maybe you should message me and I'll send you some of my work on
Good.
it. There's a long story about negation and Haurami that's very, very interesting.
Good. So, Nicholas, I hope that you have got your answer. I'm sorry for extending, Dr. Shuan. It seems that participants engaging your answer. So there's also one more question from Professor Dr. Abbas. Dr. Abbas Mustafa says that um, my question to Dr. Shuan, how can language management policies support the preservation and promotion of the Kurdish language within its culture context?
Well, I have thought about this, right? Because because I'm not interested in standardization. I'm not sure that's actually
Yes.
good for anyone. But I was thinking about how we have stories and literature and folk tales from every corner of Kurdistan in every variety. And I always imagined an educational kind of setup where people were studying the literatures and stories of the people closest to them first, right? Where people could, like why do Kurds in grade school in Kurdistan not study Haurami literature? Why don't they study, all of these things, right? We should be learning all. If you speak Sorani, you should be learning Kurmanji in the next in grade 2, right? Before learning English or Arabic or one of these other languages, we should be learning each other's languages. We should be reading our own literatures. We should be, yeah. And I'm not sure what that policy looks like. I'd say it's probably universal mother tongue education for all people, and then mandatory new languages of our neighbors all through school. But I don't make these policies, so maybe I'm not the one to ask.
Okay, thank you so much, dear Dr. Shuan. Do you have anything as a final words before ending the session?
I just want to say how much of a pleasure this has been. I really enjoyed it. Got to get excited about a few things. So thank you, Aksangar, for having me.
Thank you so much, dear Dr. Shuan, for this wonderful and rich discussion. It was, truly an honor to have you with us. And I myself, learned a lot from your experience and ideas. So also, thank you to all participants, academics, researchers, linguists who joined us today and shared their questions and attention, insights, and their addition. So if dear participants, if anyone would like to receive a certificate of this interview, please remember to write your full name and a correct email in the chat box. This is the end of our session. We hope to meet again in future events and interviews. So take care, everyone, and have good evening or good day wherever you are. Thank you.